There are many exemplary overhaul mods for Medieval 2, but if there is one challenge that, at least to me, is extremely hard to pull off with this game, it must be to completely change the time period. What I mean by that is while other Medieval era overhaul mods fit perfectly with Medieval 2, and that even a total conversion mod like Third Age fits well because it's technically also a medieval fantasy game, it takes much for me to immerse myself in a Medieval 2 mod that tries to move our era far back and forth. Because there is something about this game that feels tailored to the medieval period in terms of aesthetics. It's therefore quite the accomplishment that Lucium Total War, even after the long since release of Empire and Napoleon, manages to feel so good, and importantly, authentic. In this video, I'll be showcasing exactly why Lucium Total War is such an amazing mod, but also go over the many improvements and changes the mod has been experiencing in the past year and a half, all of which will be coming in version 3.5. Lastly, if you enjoy my videos, it would mean a lot if you subscribe to the channel and left a like and a comment after watching. So then, what exactly is Lucium Total War? There are in fact two Lucium campaigns. For the purposes of this video, we will be dealing exclusively with the Lucium Europe campaign. Lucium takes place largely in the 18th century, beginning in 1700, which incidentally is the same year Empire Total War begins. In terms of the campaign, Lucium interestingly finds itself somewhere between Empire and Napoleon. Ditching the Americas completely, Lucium instead focuses on Europe and parts of Africa and Asia, with a massive map that brings the experience so much more depth. Playing as one of the many large empires here, you really feel that sense of scale, and whether you're playing as the enormous Ottomans, the powerful Austrians, the French, or the Spanish, the amount of provinces here makes it feel like you're an actual custodian of these empires. And believe me, they are not easy to maintain or keep intact. And let's get right into why this is. Lucium Total War makes full and complete use of events and added mechanics to deepen every campaign, no matter which faction you're playing as. Let's start with a comparatively smaller faction like Sweden, one which admittedly at this time was a fledgling empire, to the point where it even challenged Russia for supremacy of the Baltics. But instead of just beginning with a bunch of provinces and the game telling you to go nuts, Lucium actually has our factions begin with ongoing historical diplomatic relations. This means that Sweden begins at war with Russia, and if you now are frantically looking for your king, you may stop looking for him in Sweden. He's not even in Finland. No, my guy is actually laying down pipes in a fort on the border with Russia in Livonia, actively out here fighting. But while diplomatic relations are one thing, Lucium goes further and provides actual historical context and developing events. As such, Sweden, for example, is specifically stated as remaining in the Great Northern War with Russia, with supremacy of Northern Europe hanging in the balance. To essentially the largest empire in the world, the Ottoman one, looks can deceive, and even though you once were the scourge of Europe, your greatness is no longer guaranteed. If the Austrians you begin at war with weren't enough, the Persians in the east are eyeing your border regions. And what's more, national sentiment and uprisings in Greece will make maintaining public order difficult. With such a vast empire, managing your armies and knowing where and when to use them is crucial, especially if you want to do more than just maintain what you start with. In Spain, the Habsburg monarch controls a vast empire of not just most of Iberia, but much of both southern and northern Italy, and even holds possessions in the lowlands. But remember how Spain kind of did that whole incest thing and became world champs at it? Well, that kind of leads to premature deaths of some people. And once there's a bit of a succession crisis happening, you might want to take care when people threaten to rise up all over your overseas empire. The United Kingdom also gets a little bit of a succession crisis as a treat, because even though you begin with some sweet Netherlandian possessions, well, you might not be the ruler for quite a while when the good old king turns in his crown. That is, unless you make it your life's work. Thing is, right from the get-go, you receive the incredible choice of crowning one of two kings, George of Hanover or James Francis Stuart. This is a crucial decision, because what you're choosing here is not just some guy, but whether you wish to have a Protestant or a Catholic crowned king. And if you know a thing or two about British history, it's that by 1700, the nation had very recently undergone the Glorious Revolution, which dealt exactly with the ousting of a Catholic king. In fact, James's father, James. This brings up an extremely interesting choice for you, namely that you'll actually be able to keep Britain Protestant, or through a series of events, trials, and nightmarish amounts of unrest, bring it back to the Catholic Church. There are a bunch of other events for the UK as well, including how to manage the various kings or queens, rebellions or sentiments in Scotland and Ireland, and even those that seek to stop the French in becoming the masters of Europe by funding anti-rural sentiment. France might just be the single most powerful nation in Europe and sits in a fairly good spot. But internally, France must deal with both Protestant and atheist sentiments brewing over time, as well as the very real public distrust of the king and the monarchy itself. As such, while the UK is sitting fairly safely on its island, France is staring down the battle of a continent that very much finds itself in an era of change. Prussia is eyeing the unification of Germany and a spot amongst the great powers, while Austria is seeking to retain its own place in the sun. These scripts and events of Lucium are so deep and so much fun to play and partake in that it really helps to pull you into this time period. They're not just written well, but the event images are spot on time and time again, which, like in the case of England's kingly dilemma, makes you excited and forces you to sit at the edge of your seat in anticipation of what might happen next. But whether you are attempting an expansion of the realm or simply maintaining what you have, Lucium does a lot more than just scripting to make sure you have a constant enjoyable experience from turn to turn. You see, a vital part of Lucium 3.5 is a refresh of its UI images and overall presentation. And a big part of this UI is the ability to understand how cultures and policies impact your campaign. What's so amazing about Lucium is that every single province is assigned a permanent and unshakable cultural tradition. This means that in France, provinces in the north will have the French culture, providing you certain bonuses, while in the south, Occitan culture prevails and provides a few other modifiers. At the same time, Norwegian culture provides different bonuses than English culture, but not every culture is purely beneficial. The internal ethnic and national struggles in the Austrian Empire is made evident not just through the event chain, that is the Hungarian Revolt, but through each cultural tradition scattered across it. Outside of Austria proper, but within the empire, the Slavic culture can make it hard to keep the people in line due to fairly strong independent sentiments. And don't get me started on the Ottomans, who are forced to navigate a truly wide variety of cultures, and yet most of them are peaceful. Again, except for those Slavs. This is because Lucium actually offers a system of accepted and non-accepted cultures. A feature that mostly sadly works in the background, your accepted cultures are largely the ones you begin the game with. But if you control more than 75% of a certain culture, you actually get the option to make it an accepted one, which either removes or significantly improves those negative modifiers. Again, the fact that each region has a culture, and the fact that there are so many different ones, from the Greek majority that remains in Ottoman Constantinople, to the Levantine culture in the Holy Land, the diversity here really makes each region shine that much more. And not just because they're so fun to just have working in the background either, but because these UI icons are so bloody gorgeous. Lucium also offers a system of policies which will decide how you approach governing settlements and which buildings you have on offer at any given moment, and you receive an important option at the very beginning. Every city can be given a policy, one that focuses on either cultural, military, or economic policies. Policies in this way mostly means which buildings you're able to construct. So where a cultural policy opens up religious and entertainment buildings, a military policy allows you to build more advanced barracks and recruitment buildings. And finally, the economic policy unlocks better trade and market buildings. As such, this system encourages you to specialize your settlements and create large centers of trade, helps you to focus on improving public order, or to create military bastions that will be vital to your war machine. As you might have noticed, that's not the only thing these policies do though. They also inherently come with a bonus to each sector, meaning a cultural policy will on its own improve public order, a military building increases the beginning rank of your units, slightly improves public order, and even lets you recruit one more unit per turn in the region. And finally, the economic policy increases tradable goods, increasing the settlement's economic value. Policies, especially for larger factions, take one turn to finish, and can be difficult and time-consuming to place down, since they must be done for every city if you wish to begin constructing stuff. Of course, if you're like me, this can be part of the fun, as micromanaging is a big part of the strategy experience for me. But if you want it a bit easier, you can spend gold on turn 1 to have the game automatically place down policies for you, in a way that more or less best suits a generic path for your faction. In short, if you've got the money and don't want to spend more time, then paying for policy placements can be a good choice to make. And with that, I think policies is an awesome feature that allows the player to tailor their empire to their liking, and to focus industries or trade centers where they wish. You might have seen it already, but Lucium version 3.5 makes even more cosmetic changes. City models for military-focused settlements now look like proper star forts surrounding an actual settlement, and forts themselves have that cool star fort look as well. We have new and beautiful models for priests, farmland looks appropriately 18th century, family members and generals have new and improved portraits, units and buildings have their own new UI icons, and everything is neatly wrapped into beautiful time-appropriate music. Other changes include an improvement to region borders, new building trees, a revamp of religions, now featuring the splitting up of Protestantism into Anglican, Lutheran, and Calvinist, as well as new religions in Judaism and Shia Islam. Each general now has a personal religion that feature alongside their nationality, a bunch of new cultures, and much more.
Hail my king!
Votre Majesté.
Eure Befehle?
Dejadme atacar, mi señor!
Alcuni dicono che sono il gioiello del Mediterraneo. Che ne dite?
I have to mention this map once again, which has been tailor-made for Lucium's Europe campaign. It truly is a marvel, and even though I love the sheer amount of cities and landmass, I have to say I'm particularly fond of its depiction of warmer climates like Spain's, that just looks so warm and Mediterranean as opposed to the slightly darker, colder look of, say, Britain. No matter where you find yourself though, Lucium's world feels authentic, strategic, and just downright fun. But we can't talk about this map without mentioning the obvious. Thanks to Medieval 2's restricted engine, in terms of number of cities on the map, the Lucium modders had to make a hard choice. Despite taking place in an age of more and more global empires, there is no American theater here. This is of course something even vanilla Medieval 2 portrays, but we must remember that vision is key here, and Lucium's vision is to bring a campaign that feels specialized for this time period. And arguably, an age where most of the important wars between the great powers did after all take place in Europe for the most part. The Great Northern War, the War of the Spanish Succession, the War of the Austrian Succession, and the 7 Years' War did after all mostly take place in Europe, even though some of these also included theaters of war and they're spread around the world. In other words, even though it's a shame not to have more of the world here, the justification is definitely valid here, and it even gives Lucium more leeway to play around with and expand the map much further east as well. Of course, with a 1700s campaign also comes a 1700s battlefield, and the units here are beautifully crafted and transported from the Middle Ages to the age of imperialism. In terms of aesthetics, I think you'll know exactly what you're getting yourself into here if you played Empire Total War. Here we have a focus on line infantry and cannon artillery, which really do spice up this time period and give it that authenticity. And thanks to the awesome new models and the packing firing sounds of Medieval 2, it all looks great even today.
Grâce à Dieu, nous avons abattu les portes de l'ennemi.
Of course, we do still rely on cavalry to get the job done, and the spirit of Pike and Shot does indeed follow us at least in the first decades of this campaign. And of course, with the dedication put in here, factions feel varied and unique, and I like that kinda like in Medieval 2 and I suppose Empire as well, you can relatively easily tell the differences between them. If there are things I'd love to see implemented in Lucium someday soon, it would be 4 things in particular. Number 1, and these are features that feature in another mod, are actual carried banners. The fact that these are missing does make it feel like something is just a bit off, since if we do look at the 1648 mod, the banners there just completely change the look of our armies. Second, the implementation of the same smoke effects as, again, 1648. Smoke and shot effects in Medieval 2 look fine as they are, but they do appear aged and kind of timid, and I much prefer the smoke effects from 1648 that appear a bit more realistic and offers more showmanship, if you will. With these 2 cosmetic improvements, there's nothing that could stop Lucium from becoming the ultimate Age of Musket mod even on the battlefield. Third, I hope some balancing will be made to how much damage cannons do to city walls. Right now, you really need to pump those walls with many cannon shots to do any real damage, so I think that needs to be changed a little. And lastly, while I do love the new music on the campaign map, I think the new battle music is a bit out of place, and it does appear unimmersive in my opinion. So perhaps a change or a sub-mod that implements either Empire or Napoleon music, or just re-enables the vanilla Medieval 2 tracks, would go a long way in my eyes and ears. But when everything is said and done, Lucium 3.5 is not finished yet, but is estimated to release sometime early next year. As it stands now though, it's already not just a fantastic mod on its own, but this update brings with it some amazing changes and improvements that really makes a big difference in how you play, how immersed you feel in this time period, and the choices you make, especially when it comes to the fun new scripting of events related to the King of Britain. Even though there are some changes that I'd like to see particularly on Battlefield, they are for the most part cosmetic. And even if this early version of the update were to be the final one, Lucium would have proved itself to be one of the finest mods ever made for Medieval 2, and that's actually crazy to consider when this is a 17-year-old game by now. Let me know your thoughts on Lucium Total War and this video in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.